we essentially got caught, and we were, I guess you could say, outed by staff in Campus Crusade. And the staff that was there in Virginia Beach with us told the crew staff at our campuses back in the Midwest about what we had been doing over the summer.
Welcome to Voices of Deconversion. In each episode, an atheist or agnostic shares their story of deconversion from Christianity. Our stories remind us we're in it together. They encourage us as we discover who we are and help us to embrace who we become. Now here's Steve with today's guest.
My guest today has been instructing English as a second language for 20 years and has been a full-time lecturer at Purdue University since 2014. She's currently working on her second master's degree, specifically about the experiences of lesbian ex-members of Campus Crusade for Christ. Now she considers herself an ex-Christian who's agnostic/atheist. In her free time, she enjoys kayaking, playing guitar and drums, rock climbing, traveling, and learning languages. She and her wife recently got married 2 weeks ago. I'd like to welcome Chelsy Albertson to the podcast. Chelsy, welcome to the show.
Thanks a lot for having me.
Yeah, and congratulations on recently getting married.
Thanks. It feels like one of those major adult things, you know?
Yeah, it is. That's really cool, though. So where did you get married? Because with COVID and everything, I'm really curious about how that worked for you. And
Yeah, we got married right here in Indiana at just the courthouse downtown here in our small town. It was me, her, and the judge alone in a room. It was super intimate and really, really nice. The judge was super respectful and open-minded, and so it was really cool to have that specific judge do it for us.
That's cool because you're in Indiana, and
Yep.
you never know.
You never know.
You never know what kind of judge you're going to get.
That's why we specifically chose. Yeah, exactly. We chose the specific, the only Democratic judge in the entire county. So we figured that might be a safe bet.
Yeah, I think that is. And I mean, my assumption, of course you never know, but my assumption is that most of the judges would at least be professional. You'd hope. Maybe not.
Exactly. That's exactly what we thought too. And then it was also sort of that thing in the back of your mind where you might be reading their micro expressions and you never know if they're just kind of sighing or like kind of rolling their eyes to themselves being like, I can't believe I have to do this gay wedding, you know?
Right, exactly. Yeah, and it's your day and you want it to go the way you want it to go well and not have any of those bad emotions or bad feelings.
Yeah, exactly. And to just top it all off, we'll have a bit of a gathering later this summer with loved ones. Hopefully, everyone gets a chance to be vaccinated by then and things like that. So it should go pretty smoothly.
That's really cool. And have you been able to get vaccinated yet, you and your wife?
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Yep. We both did. Luckily, I, as an educator, was able to get it pretty early on. And then she was able to get it just about a month after I did. So.
Okay. And did either of you have any side effects, like any of the chills or like feeling a little sick or anything?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the second shot took us both out pretty much as far as kind of feverish, feeling pretty low for a day or two, and then bounced right back. And now we get to do indoor dining for the first time in a year and a half.
Now you can be a normal human again.
Exactly.
Yeah. I got my second shot about a week ago, and the next day I had a slight fever and I didn't feel so great. And like you, the day after that, I was like, I feel great. So yeah, I'm glad I did it, and I'm getting excited we can actually see friends and family again.
Yeah, exactly. It's really nice to start moving back to normal a little bit.
Yeah. So I usually start with a different question, but I kind of wanted to start with kind of a fun question. I think it's a fun question. I heard someone else on another podcast say this a while back, or ask their guest, and I thought it was kind of good. So now that you're not a Christian, how do you like to spend your Sundays?
That is a really good question.
Yeah.
As you'll probably find throughout this interview, I'm very torn on the inside about my past experiences and my present experiences. So when it comes to Sundays, sometimes I wake up and wish I had something specific to go to that was like structured and organized, that gave me a sense of belonging, because that's just so easy that Christianity gives you that. But then on the other hand, we woke up today and watched 4 hours of Game of Thrones. So that's also really nice.
That's also kind of awesome.
It's kind of awesome. So it's like,
That's
I always hated
cool.
waking up early for church, but that sense of belongingness, you can never quite like replace that as easily as you might think that you can. So
Yeah, it's very true. And I had a big kind of part of my life that was a big part of my life that was missing, and it's hard to gather that in the same way. And what do you think helps people get over that, or not get over it, but like what helped you through it, or how are you feeling about it right now, since it's something that has been kind of hard to adjust to, maybe?
yeah, I would say that I still struggle with it on a daily basis. I would say even to this day it hasn't gone away, and that's sort of how I view my entire process of walking away from Christianity. It's
Yeah,
sort of like this comfort in my discomfort type of feeling, um,
I like that a
that
lot.
I yeah, I recognize that I don't have the answers. I don't have that community that I used to have. It does not feel as easy and comfortable as it used to be. And that is where I'm at right now. And that's okay that that's where I'm at. I'm also living in a state that I don't want to live in a town that I don't want to live in. So there's some just sort of social issues that will also be within my control within a year or so, when my wife and I move on to a different location, that it might be easier to find community, easier to find a sense of belonging,
Yeah.
to each their own process. And mine has been, I'd say, kind of like a slow go with searching for that sense of community.
And I think that's really a great message for people, because when you're coming through deconversion, especially early on, there is something lacking. And like, I say that as, with the full awareness that Christians say you have a hole in your heart that God needs to fill, So like, that's the Christian mindset,
100%.
right? So I understand that's their response. If I were to say, I have a hole in my heart that like, or I have a hole in my life that
100%.
needs to be filled with community. But I mean, guest after guest have mentioned the way that they have found community. And then sometimes not, right? Like you said, learning to be comfortable in your discomfort. I think there's something about that. And then I truly feel, because I deconverted 15 years ago. So I feel like as time has gone on, it becomes easier and easier, as time goes on, and you get to create your own communities, which I think are closer knit, are better. But certainly church had something to offer that like we don't get, but we also don't get all the
Right.
crap that comes along with it, which is
Right.
good.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel exactly the same way as what you just said. It's like after
Yeah.
15 years, you get to start realizing you're making your own rules, you're making your own decisions, and that feels really nice. But then a couple of those perks that come along with being in a Christian community, fall away, and you have to kind of figure out how to cope with that. And
Yeah.
it can be tricky sometimes.
Yeah.
And you're exactly right. Also, what you said, anytime, I'm always so hesitant to tell any Christian friends of mine, because I do still have Christian friends. I don't want to tell them, like, oh, I wake up and struggle with a sense of emptiness every day. It's like, because I know exactly what they're thinking. They're thinking, well, if
Yeah.
you had Jesus in your heart, you wouldn't feel that emptiness. And it's like, uh, for me, Christianity is completely illogical. Religions are completely illogical for me.
Yeah.
And I can't sit there and rationalize through wanting to have a man in my heart to
Yeah.
make me feel better on Sundays. It's like, no, that's not the answer for me, but thanks anyway.
Yeah, you might have a sense of emptiness, but you don't want it filled with a false sense of fulfillment or a false sense of love that's actually not true and actually not
Totally.
there, and is completely conditional upon you obeying, whatever particular church you go to, that church's doctrines and those church
Totally.
members' doctrines, because of course Christianity is very different, wherever you go, but
Exactly.
in some ways. So
Yet
yeah,
still all misogynistic somehow,
yeah,
no matter
somehow it
where you
all comes
go.
back to that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I want to get into your story a bit. So tell me give me an understanding of your childhood years and how Christianity influenced it as you were
Yeah, so
growing up.
I was raised Christian, like many people who are guests on this podcast. Raised Christian, conservative parents, white family, Midwest. the whole just kind of Norman Rockwell painting of like how things are supposed to go. And it was my parents and my brother and me, and then my half sister from my father's previous marriage. She lived with her mom in a different state. So there's sort of technically 3 of us kids and 2 parents, and a super, super conservative Christian upbringing in a very small town in Indiana. And
so you grew up out there.
Yep, I did grow up out here. I always like to, for my own ego and pride, I like to give a disclaimer that I haven't lived here the whole time. I've lived abroad, I've lived in other states, I've lived all around and traveled all around. But currently, because of the job offer at Purdue, as well as my now wife, Amanda, who's doing her PhD here, it's important for me to be here. But we only have 1 more year, and then we get to move on.
Yeah. Well, that's really cool, though. I mean, it seems like you really like your job and you have a good job, and but good things are ahead, and you can make decisions about moving somewhere that you like better in the near future.
Indeed. Yeah, indeed.
So as you grew older, like, was Christianity a big part of your personal life? Sometimes people say, like I would say, I used to have a relationship with God, Some people see it that way. Other people, they just kind of like went along with kind of what their parents told them, and it was just the way they did things. They went to church, but maybe it wasn't as personal. Where do you fall in that kind of spectrum of being a Christian when you're young?
Yeah, great question. And I wanted to backtrack just a second to say that in my conservative upbringing as a kid, it turned out that as I looked back later in life, my parents and my family in the small town were even more conservative than the people around us. So when I went to high school, public high school every day, and I talked to my friends and we were all Christians, I thought that we were all experiencing Christianity the same. But the truth was, we weren't even allowed to have internet at my home. I wasn't allowed to watch PG-13 movies. We weren't allowed to date, not even like be around, a boy in my case, right? Did not allowed to be around a boy until I was, 16 or something like that, while all of my other friends were dating much younger than that. They had cell phones, I didn't. They had the internet, I didn't. They could go to all kinds of movies, I couldn't. So yeah, it turned out that I was actually raised even more conservative Christian than my conservative Christian friends.
Wow.
So.
And did you go to church every Sunday? Was that something that was a pretty routine?
Sunday, Wednesday, Thursday. It's like you got your youth group, you got your Sunday morning, and then maybe later on Sunday you come back for yet another activity or thing. It was extremely integral to my upbringing socially. Big tons of my friends were church friends. A lot of important social things happened to me. At church. Yeah,
at church. And so what type of conservative Christianity was it? Is it a well-known denomination, or was it kind of obscure? Or?
It is, and now as an out and proud lesbian, I think it's basically nothing but macabre comedy to reflect that it's a Presbyterian church, and recently, within the past 5-10 years, the Presbyterian church split to the PCA and the PCUSA, and one of them accepts gay marriage and the other doesn't. Surprise, surprise. The church that my parents go to, of course, doesn't accept gay marriage. So yeah, so that's kind of where we are right now.
You talked a lot about how conservative your family was. What was your understanding of God as you were growing up? Did you pray a lot? Did you feel like you had a close connection with God, or was it not so close?
Yeah, great. And that comes back to the question you had asked earlier. Sorry for sidestepping it.
No, it's okay.
I would say, again, this is all only realized in retrospect, because when you're going through it, you're more or less, what's the word? Mind controlled. What's it? Brainwashed.
Yeah, you're just going through the motions.
You're just kind of, you're doing the thing, and it's like, what on earth else would I be doing? Nothing. There's nothing except this. Nothing exists except what I'm doing and what I'm being told what to do. Yeah. So in retrospect, I believe that I did not have a very good they would say personal relationship with Jesus Christ, personal relationship with God. I don't think I had a strong one, because when I was alone, I would not do the things that you're supposed to do when you're alone with God. You're supposed to do your devotionals. You're supposed to journal to God a prayer. You're supposed to pray really often. You're supposed to feel the presence of the Lord. I never experienced any of that shit. Yeah. But I would go to church 6 times a week because all my friends are there. And then we would all sing this super awesome Christian rock music together that feels good in your soul, quote, quote, in your soul, but it's actually just firing chemicals in your brain to feel good because it's good music, you know? And so
the beats are
I'd be
nice.
like, well, exactly. And I was a drummer and I was a guitarist, you know? And so it's all this stuff. It's like, felt so emotional and connected to God when I was at church or in youth group or with my friends. When I was alone, I didn't feel God. I didn't experience God. I didn't feel the Lord. I didn't feel Jesus was with me. I didn't want to talk to him when I was alone. It didn't feel as emotionally satisfying as it did when I was singing songs at church. So
it wasn't
I wouldn't
natural,
do it too much.
Like for you to just to experience God that way.
Right. Or enjoyable in any way. I'm like, this is boring. I don't want to do this boring thing or read this boring book. It's like, I want to go talk to my friends and hang out with my friends, you know?
I think back a lot about how I used to fall asleep reading my Bible, and then I would feel really guilty. But it's really boring.
It's so boring. It's absolutely the worst. The one time I clung to my Bible for dear life, I tell my friends this story and they always laugh at me, is after I saw The Ring. You know, the movie, The Ring.
Horror movie, maybe?
Yeah, a horror movie with the girl with the black hair draped over her face and she crawls out of a well. My friends forced me to go see that movie, and that night I slept with my Bible because I was like, surely the Bible will protect me from the girl in the ring. It's
interesting. Yeah, it's interesting to think back on stuff like that. I don't watch scary movies too often, but I do like to occasionally. And when I watched one last year with my son, or I think anyway, I watched a scary movie and I remember that night being kind of freaked out, and I don't believe in any supernatural stuff at all. But I was like, this is kind of funny. Like I'm getting under my covers kind of quick, you know, full grown man, after I saw a scary movie, and it's just funny.
Totally.
But it's kind of also it's nice to be like, none of that's true. It's just, it gets your brain in the fight or flight, you know, and that's what's happening. And you're freaking out because you think there's a threat, because movies look real and your brain, some of it can't figure it out. Yeah.
It seems that you and I might experience that in a really similar way. I'm kind of a chicken shit, so I don't really watch scary movies, but anytime I do accidentally glance at a trailer or something that is all supernatural and everything, I get that, you know, fast heart rate, because I'm like, oh man, that's so scary, you know, and I'm like, wait, none of it's real. It's okay. I'm safe.
It was kind of cool because my last guest mentioned how she loves watching horror movies now, and she can experience it without having to think that she said it was great. She said she can watch it without having to believe it's a documentary.
Exactly.
That's a great way to put it. Yeah. So that's really interesting, and that's really funny, I think.
Yeah.
Was there anybody in your life that you felt influenced your faith the most, whether it be good or bad, or just influenced you the most, do you think?
Yeah, I had a friend at the time who was sort of a guiding light to me in a lot of ways. As I'm older, I'm like, I totally had a crush on her. But at the time, of course, I would not realize that at all. Yeah. And so, but she was very much sort of a guiding light, very much an example of what I wanted to be in Christianity, this very positive, very introspective, extremely devout, personal Christian, where she had that personal connection to God. You could tell when people walked out of the room, she still experienced God. And I was like, I don't, and I wish I could be like her.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
There have been a lot of people I've talked to that have mentioned feeling guilt that they didn't experience God the way that they were supposed to, quote unquote.
Right, quote, quote.
And did you have that kind of, it sounds like you had that kind of a feeling?
Sometimes? For sure. Yeah, because I do get asked this sometimes when people are looking into this story of mine of, you used to be a Christian. Well, so did you believe it? And I tell them, I don't know, maybe I did, maybe I didn't, but I know that I would ask my friends. I have a distinct memory of asking a friend of mine, if there are some people, according to predestination, who are chosen to go to heaven and some people who aren't chosen to go to heaven, how do I know if I'm one of the chosen ones?
Right.
And she said, don't worry, you are. And in my mind, I was like, that doesn't make sense. What if I'm not? I could
Right.
also not be. So,
Right.
it was almost like that internal disconnect that I had with the message of Christianity that, again, behind closed doors, I didn't feel like a devout Christian who had a personal relationship with God. I thought I might not be chosen.
It's kind of
I
like
almost feel like I'm not chosen,
it's like the Christian imposter syndrome, kind of.
Yes,
It's like,
for
do you
sure.
think I'm not the right kind of Christian, or I'm not being the right kind of Christian, or I'm not, I need to be something, and I don't feel like I'm doing it right.
Surely the creator of the universe didn't choose me, to go to heaven for all of eternity,
Yeah.
and I very often felt like that. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and not a lot of things in Christianity or in the Bible would convince me otherwise, I
Hmm.
guess.
How did your faith change, or did it change at all as you were getting into high school and getting older?
Yes, I got more and more devout. I got more and more devout, more and more into it, which was just crazy in retrospect. But uh, as I got into college, I joined Campus Crusade for Christ, and that is what got me to just be, they would say on fire for the Lord. Again, I have to tell you and any listeners, behind closed doors, I didn't feel or act on fire for the Lord, but out in life,
Yeah.
I was very active for Christian purposes. And all
Yeah.
my friends were in crew at Campus Crusade for Christ, crew for short. All my friends were in crew. All my social circle was there. My whole life ended up being sort of dedicated to the organization.
And no Christian would ever admit that they didn't feel the right feelings, or have, like you're explaining how, like, in private, you didn't really do the things that you felt like you should as a Christian. I think
Hmm.
probably half of Christians are just like you,
Right,
because we only see those people in public. And
right.
when I talk to people on the podcast, they were the ones who, like, in my case, like, I took it way too serious and, like, really went all in. And, that is bad in its own way. But then I feel like the other half of people, like I have a sibling who, like, she followed the steps and just did what she was supposed to do, but, like, never had the feelings, and didn't feel that close, like praying to God all the time. She didn't show her faith that way. And so I think you're in good company. Like, there are a lot of people that kind of come from that half, and I think the other half are, just everybody. I think it's pretty normal, but I think those people just didn't say it. They wouldn't admit it, probably, that they
Yeah.
didn't have those
Yeah,
feelings.
nor would I have at that time because I thought to myself, well, it's a me issue. I'm the one who needs to be doing those devotions more regularly. I'm the one who needs to be praying more regularly and, you know, all types of things that come along with the rules of Christianity. It's like I shouldn't be doing this. I should be doing this other thing. And it's like, of course, I'm not going to say those things out loud to anyone around me. I just thought maybe this is what Christianity feels like. Maybe
Yeah.
this is what the presence of God feels like. Absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
I would think that sometimes. I'm like, maybe this is it. Maybe this is Christianity. It
It's
feels good when you're out in public and it feels like nothing when you're alone, kind of.
Yeah, it's funny because it seems to me that you were actually being a very um, typical Christian, in the sense that you were blaming yourself for any
Right.
perceived problems with your religion or God, which,
Right.
it's always the person's fault. So we as
Right.
Christians kind of always take that on, like, what am I not
Hmm.
doing right? So in that way you were
Exactly.
kind of Christian, I
Yeah.
guess.
Yeah, exactly. Very Christian
Yeah,
in
very in
my
that way.
lack of knowing if I was a Christian.
Yeah. Yeah. That's kind of funny.
Yeah.
Obviously, as things progressed for you at Campus Crusade, at some point, like, you realize that you're not heterosexual, or you start realizing that you might be, a lesbian. How did that process go? Like, when did you start kind of thinking thoughts like, maybe I'm not, like, into the guys or something? I don't know.
Yeah. Thanks for asking this question. It's what I'm writing my entire master's thesis about, so I care very greatly about this topic. Um, I started having gay experiences the summer after freshman year of college, and from then it just started to be a series of questions, denial, trying to be who I thought God wanted me to be, trying to be who my disciplers, which are like mentors in Campus Crusade for Christ, who they told me I should be, who, you know, it was just everything but what I was doing. You know, it's like lesbian relationships is not glorifying to God.
So you said they were
summer, really tough.
It was during the summer, did you say, experiences?
Yep.
Okay.
Summer right after freshman year of college, and then continual for the following few years for the rest of my college life that I had, you know, a few more experiences.
And were you, it sounds like you may have shared some of your thoughts or fears with peers or with mentors.
I was, so when I had my first lesbian experience with a person who's now a friend of mine, when I had those experiences with her the summer after freshman year of college, it was on a crew summer project, which is called, it's called Summer Project, but it's basically a mission trip for the summer. A lot of them are stateside, some of them are abroad. I think they've since changed the name of Summer Project, but we were in Virginia Beach, and you know, we met, we got along, we had amazing chemistry. Next thing you know, we're you know, having experiences together. So we essentially got caught, and we were, I guess you could say, outed by staff in Campus Crusade. And the staff that was there in Virginia Beach with us told the crew staff at our campuses back in the Midwest about what we had been doing over the summer. So it wasn't so much that I told any mentor or discipler their name, but it's that they were told I was outed, and I got, you could say, forced mentorship about it, about how not to be gay.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy. So what was the extent of the outing, so to speak? Like, did they tell just a couple of people, or was it pretty much like it spread like wildfire and everybody that you knew now knew?
Great question. It spread like wildfire as far as staff were concerned. So people in positions of power over me in the organization had the most intimate knowledge that I had of my whole life. They had that knowledge about the most intimate parts of me. So my friends wouldn't know, but suddenly I'm kicked off the worship team of Campus Crusade for Christ at my university. And, you know, it's kind of all, why aren't you on the worship team anymore? It's, I just thought maybe I need to step down and focus on my faith and all this BS, you know. No, it was because I was outed. Staff found out and they kicked me out. I never got offered a position as a Bible study leader because I, quote, struggled with homosexuality. So obviously, if you're gay, you can't be a leader, because that makes sense. And so I got kicked off of all kind of stuff and not offered leadership positions and things like that. So it was a process of masking what had actually happened to me. So no, I wouldn't tell my peers, but the staff knew.
The staff knew. How did the mentorship go? I know it's, quote, mentorship, but it was really like, I don't know how you describe that, but must have been horrible.
We can say like soft conversion therapy, right? Because I don't hold a single bad feeling toward my discipler from that time. I still know her. I'm still friends with her on Facebook. I honestly think she's just like a pretty like nice, normal lady. She's just a Christian. So that's where the problems start to come in. It's kind of like, she can't just be a nice, normal lady. She is a nice, normal lady who believes that a man in the sky controls everything that we do. And so that becomes problematic in friendships. So again, I don't hold any ill will toward her. I just, it was really emotionally tumultuous for me at that time, because she asked me point blank, did you and so do physical things together on your summer project? And I just had to be like, no. And she continued to disciple me as if I had answered yes to that. Well, the truth was, the answer was yes, but of course I lied to her, but she probably saw through it, and she herself just went ahead and continued to meet with me weekly and talk about verses in the Bible that talk about refraining from temptation and things like that. So I got a lot of sort of mentoring on refraining from temptation.
How did it make you feel when she was asking or sharing verses like that with you?
Nervous and bad. I know bad is like an elementary word to use, but it's just how I felt, I just felt bad because I was like, other than this interaction, I kind of like this woman and she's like nice and kind of cool and whatever, we could even like be friends, but here I am just bold-faced lying to her. But of course, in retrospect, I had no other choice. What choice did I have? I couldn't just be like, yeah, I'm like kind of gay now and just like go about my life. I would be totally chastised for that.
Christianity is your social life at that point.
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't play along, you lose the very important social connections, especially when you're college age. Those are so critical. And to lose that, I mean, that could be devastating for people. I mean, we talked about earlier how devastating it is when you leave the church. It's hard to regain that community. I mean, you would have lost it in an instant like that. And could have been
That's exactly
really
right.
bad.
That's exactly right. And I did end up losing it anyway because a friend of mine after that and I also got into a relationship. We accepted it as a relationship and we came out, like officially came out as like lesbians and a lesbian relationship together my senior year of college while I was still in Campus Crusade for Christ. But we just looked at each other and we were like, let's just not go to Cru anymore. They don't want us there. So people ask like, so did you get kicked out of Cru? It's like, okay, no one told us stop coming to Cru, but would you want to keep going to a place where everyone around you doesn't accept you? No, right? So it's like, was I kicked out? Sure, just not directly.
You were shunned.
Yeah, we would have been shunned completely, and I lost all kinds of friends, shamed, guilted, all kinds of things. It's like we weren't gonna subject ourselves to that at that time, and we were like, no, we'll just stop going to Cru. But if you stop going to Cru, you lose all your Cru friends, and I did.
Wow. And at that point, you still considered yourself a Christian.
Oh yeah, for another good year or two. Yeah, I was really trying to push through it and be like, I think these things can coexist,
How do the people that that you're friends with who are also LGBT, how do they, if they're Christian still, if you probably know a few that are Christian, I know someone who is, but I haven't really talked to that person in depth about how they kind of work through that, and justify the anti-gay stuff in the Bible. Do you know much about how those friends or people that I'm not saying this right, but how do they live with being a Christian while they're gay? Because I find that to be such a contradiction, to be able to still be a Christian when you're gay. And so do you know, what do they say? Have you ever talked to anybody about that, about their feelings if they're still Christian?
Lots of people. Yep. Okay. Lots of people, specifically lesbians. And I find that for them, I think it often comes down to context and translations and interpretations, and that's how they might get themselves to sort of feel better about it all and be like, it's just a misinterpretation, or it's just, if you think about the context of the time, that's not real. They didn't mean abomination actually for, homosexuality. And it's like, yeah, I did that same thing for a while where I was like, no, you just need to consider more context and then it makes sense. No, well, it's all about the translations. It's the language changes between the years of the translations and the blah, blah, blah. And then after a while, I was like, no, the problem is much more deeply rooted than that. It's much more deeply rooted. It's at the root of the religion itself that it does not allow difference, period.
That's
and I'm not willing to be, I'm not willing to be a part of something that doesn't allow difference. Somehow Christianity, Western Christianity specifically, has also in a lot of ways become racist. And I'm like, how on earth can you be like white racist against people of color when Jesus was a Middle Eastern brown guy? It seems so counterintuitive, but
exactly. And it is counterintuitive and it makes no sense. And it's all about emotion. It's all about emotion. That's something that I learned when I deconverted, and I shared with my family the academic reasons why I didn't believe the Bible was divine, that's, there was a lot of emotion going on there for me and a lot of crazy like mental health stuff going on. But at the time I was focused on the facts. As far as I was concerned, I was trying to follow the truth where it led. And I learned when telling my parents, my mom got upset, cried and hung up. We're on good terms, but my dad got the I have no idea what to say to you. He's a super kind man, my favorite person in the world, but got the deer in the headlights, like when I was saying, like giving him the facts for why the Bible was, not divine, blah, blah, blah. And I just realized, like, it's not about the facts for them. It's about the feelings that they get. It's about their personal experience. And that's very true, I think, of the racist, like Trump supporting Christians out there. I think it's all about being a part of a team and a club and a group and a gang and a tribe. And that's their team, that's their tribe. And doesn't matter what the person says, doesn't matter how bad it is, they're on board.
It's that feeling of belongingness. It's like, well, if this is what the group says I do, then this is what I'm going to do. And it just gets really radical really fast. Great
story about that. Sort of interesting. I'm going to share a sort of interesting story. You ready?
Let's hear it.
Okay.
Make it as mediocre as possible.
Oh, going for that. Okay. So when Trump got nominated, a news person was talking about this. They were going, like, I don't know. He was giving a speech and he said something about being okay with gay people, or like, we accept the gay people, or I don't know what he said. Something basically as a Republican saying it's okay for people to be gay. And these two like delegates from Mississippi looked at each other and said something like, "Are we okay with that?" And they kind of like shrugged and were like, "Okay," like now they're on board.
Wow.
So
that's all it took. Right?
Yeah, I know. It's so funny because like that's been like one of their platform issues forever.
Of
and
course.
Then the cult leader says, "Don't worry about that anymore," and they're like, "Okay, you got it."
Sure.
Yeah,
yep.
I just thought it was kind of speaks to what you were just saying,
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely, and even in our chat time before we started recording this podcast, we were talking about, how many differences are there truly between a cult and a religion? It's like, I'm not convinced that there are that many fundamental differences between the two.
Exactly. Very fine line.
Mm-hmm.
So up to this point in your life, what else is important to your story that maybe we haven't touched on?
I think talking about my parents a little bit would be a thing that would be important to me in this story, because they full-blown, wholeheartedly do not accept me as a lesbian. They don't believe people are even lesbians or can be that, because how can you be something that isn't pleasing to God? You aren't that thing, as in the verb to be. You struggle with that thing, or you have experienced that thing, but you should turn away from it and be the person that God wants you to be.
Yeah.
And, while I did not stop being a Christian because of gayness, it definitely does not seem to be compatible in my mind, homosexuality and Christianity. So many things in the Bible speak against, like I said, difference, specifically sexual difference, sexual expression of any kind, sexual feelings of any kind, sexuality of any kind. And so I really stand on the sort of pro-sex stance of just being very supportive and open about sexual conversation, sex ed. I think that's so important to have strong sex ed in all states, and all the conservative states that happen to be super Christian just so happen to have horrifying sex ed that is abstinence only. And then the kids don't get to learn anything, and they end up pregnant at early ages, doing illegal, dangerous abortions, or getting a bunch of STIs, when all of that could have been avoided had they received an education about sex and how sex works,
So your parents were are kind of still a big influence in your life because of the rejection that they basically gave you. So
certainly.
Now, they didn't know any of this. They didn't know about your sexuality until well, when did they know? When did they know? I mean, it would have been after you were outed to the leadership. Did your parents find out at that time?
No, thankfully. So they didn't find out any time when I was in college. It wasn't until a year after college that I wrote them a letter, and I paid $30 to have it mailed to them to arrive to their house on a Sunday. At that time, mail would never arrive on a Sunday, so you have to pay a lot of money. So I paid $30 to ship a letter overnight on a Saturday to have it arrive on a Sunday. And the last line of the letter said, "Please send me a text so that I know you've gotten this letter and you've read it." They didn't text me at all, but they had gotten the letter. And so I thought, wow, even the simplest request to just know that they know couldn't even be fulfilled. Of course, they were shattered, and I have to have some sympathy for that, because I recognize when you're so deeply entrenched in a belief system, in thought patterns, like in a religion, that anything that happens that seems to be outside of that is devastating to you, and it's shocking to you. And if it's your own kid who's doing something outside of that belief system, then it's extra shocking to you. So I do sympathize for any shock and pain that they felt at the beginning. But I have no sympathy at all for the fact that they have never been able to accept me as different. Right? It's kind of like the Bible supposedly, suddenly, is for white heterosexual men first and foremost, and then women secondly. White and heterosexual. It's like, how did Christianity become that? That's insane.
Yeah.
But those are the most worthy of God's words, according to Christianity.
Yeah. So how long did it take before they actually had a conversation with you after they got the letter?
I would say just about a day or two, but they were pretty devastating conversations. They would ask me things about, they would ask me if I've ever been raped, and that must be why I'm a lesbian. I never have, thankfully. And they asked me if I wanted to come home for conversion therapy. I said no.
Wow.
That also would have been devastating, and I have to give, a bit of a note here to all the people who have gone through those things, who have gone through conversion therapy, who have had suicidal thoughts, who have been sexually assaulted and experienced those horrible things in their life. My heart goes out to those people, and I hope they can find the resources that they need to be as happy and healthy as possible. Fortunately, I didn't experience any of those things, but my parents tried to put me through conversion therapy, and it no doubt would have been horrifying.
Yeah. And after you had these kind of difficult conversations with your parents, what kind of relationship do you have with them now?
Minimal, almost non-existent, very avoidance-based, things like that. They don't want me to talk about huge things in my life, like being married, for example, or there was a stretch of years there where they wouldn't allow me, again, because of Christianity. So I know we're talking about gay stuff right now, but it's all because of Christianity.
No, it's your story.
Right?
This is integral to your story, so.
Right, and very based on Christianity, as it turns out. But they wouldn't allow me to say the word "we" on the phone. We went to the store, we went and got gas, we took a walk this afternoon. They would shut down immediately on the phone, because "we" implies there's another person next to me, and that other person is going to be a woman who's engaging in lesbian sexual relationships with their daughter. So I couldn't say "we got gas in the car this afternoon. We worked on homework." Just complete denial of humanity, like human existence. Not even their sexuality or anything, but previous partners of mine, that they even existed at all, would be totally denied by the verbiage my parents would allow me or not allow me to use when I talked to them.
It's just heartbreaking.
And after a while, it was really hard. But yeah, I suppose I've reached the point in my life where in a lot of ways, I kind of just want to like throw up the middle finger to anyone who won't accept me for who I am. I'm like, I'm sorry. I don't have enough years on earth to be worried about what you think of me.
Exactly. You've got to pursue your best possible life and happiness, and
without harming others, and that's what it is. They view homosexuality as harmful. I'm like, it's not harmful. In fact, I myself am very dedicated to living a life that is not harmful to other people. So I'm pursuing happiness without harming others. I don't see anything wrong with that.
Yeah, it's really hard to not be able to share those big life moments with people that are close to you.
Are supposed to be your close network, you know.
Exactly.
So back to your original question, how do you find community outside of Christianity? It's like it does start to come down to that chosen family concept, you know, where you start to, okay, it's not just these people I've been handed to me, like my family or my church members when I was growing up, those people that were just handed to me as community. It's more of me searching out the people who have stayed by my side, the new people that I meet who are willing to support me and be there for me. And those end up being my community, my family, that chosen family.
Yeah. So you talked a little bit about, you know, it was about a year or two after you came out as lesbian that you ended up not considering yourself a Christian anymore. Talk about that a little bit, and about kind of what put you over the edge and made you go, you know what, I'm done with Christianity too.
Yep. The biggest thing that started the ball rolling was not, in fact, anything about gayness. It was a mission trip with crew to India. I went to Mumbai, India with a group of people. And while I was there, I looked around me. I looked at the thousands and thousands of people walking on the street. It's a very highly, densely populated place. And I was like, there's no way that all of these completely random and normal people are going to hell because they're not Christians. There's no way. There's no way. And what kind of a God would I want to serve that does something like that? That seems extremely cruel to me. So while I was on a mission trip, right, I'm supposed to be evangelizing, I had stomach problems on some days because hashtag like spicy Indian food, right?
Oh,
and
okay.
then I realized that
practical reasons why you're having stomach pains,
exactly.
That's
yeah, right. And so I would stay back. We were staying at like I don't remember, maybe some kind of like YMCA building or something like that. We all had kind of like little like bunk beds and things like that. And I would stay back because I had stomach problems. And then I realized, wait, I don't really like this evangelizing thing either. Yeah. And I decided to even kind of like be like, oh, I'm sick again today. And oh, the next day, you know what? I'm still not feeling great. Also, I wouldn't have to go evangelize to people in groups.
Wow. So it was really hitting you hard, like on an actually physical level. You were feeling like, I can't do this.
I cannot walk out of here with my Bible and with my white friend. You know, it's going to be a bunch of us white people going around to all of these mostly brown Indian people, telling them that what they believe isn't quite as good as what we believe as Western white people.
So
it
weird.
Felt colonizing. It felt racist. It felt wrong. And I didn't even know like any of those words. I didn't know the word colonizing when I was there. I could feel it in my heart. This feels wrong to do. This does not feel like something that loving, compassionate people do.
Wow.
And I couldn't get myself to do it while I was there.
How long were you there?
Super short mission trip, 2 weeks,
okay.
Something like that. It was short.
And when you, how far into the trip were you when you had this moment where you're like, I can't do this?
Quickly, I would say pretty quickly. It was within the first week that I was like, nah. And you know, the funny part of this story that I always like to tell people is that Harry Potter 7, so the second to the penultimate movie of the Harry Potters had just come out to theaters at that time. And I went to the movie theater and sat in a big lazy boy chair that they had at the movie theaters 3 times in 2 weeks to watch the Harry Potter 7 movie instead of evangelizing to people.
You know what? Better use of your time.
Way better use of my time. I got to sit and be comfortable. It was like a great movie theater. It was a great movie. I could practically quote that movie by the end of the India mission trip, which is again unfortunate because when you go on mission trips, you raise money to do so. So I had a bunch of suckers' money that was paying me to go to evangelize to brown people in India, and I was using it to watch Harry Potter many times.
Yeah, that's
but you know, it's kind of like, I'm like, well, too bad. Invest your money in something better than white kids telling brown kids what to do. How about?
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. I can't believe that people don't, like, you know, you hear these stories of missionaries going to like native communities and they get murdered. You know, that's happened in history, you know, and I'm just surprised that still doesn't happen. Actually, it did a couple years back. There's some kid who was told not to go to this like really tribe that like, you know, is known to be pretty hostile to outsiders. But I know those are like rare circumstances, and I'm not equating it with what you were experiencing at all in India, but
sure, but at the same time,
I'm just surprised people don't get killed. Like, because I would be pissed if I was that person. Like, someone's coming to you and like they're like, "Hey, let me tell you why what I believe is better, and then maybe you can be cool like me." And you know, I mean, I think I'd just be like, "Get out of here! We don't need this."
It's like, "Hey, I've been here in your country for 10 seconds, but let me tell you how you're living is wrong and how I'm living is right." It's like, oh my God, the audacity.
Right. It just like makes you just feel so like horrible inside, even just like talking about it. It's like, oh, how could you even do that? You know, how could you even say that with a straight face and not feel like a horrible human being?
Exactly.
Yeah. So when you're on that trip, and early on you realize this, and you watch some Harry Potter and you avoid everything, did you, after that, were you successful in avoiding having to do any evangelizing, or did you end up kind of having to go along for some stuff, or?
Nope. Luckily, that was really close to the end of my time in college, and people are members of Cru while they're in their undergrad in college. So when you graduate, then you leave the school, right? And then you're no longer a member of Cru. So that was toward the end. So luckily, I didn't go on any more mission trips. I didn't do that anymore, and I didn't go on any more mission trips on my own, you know, outside of the organization. So I never evangelized ever again to anyone, and I'm happy about that.
Yeah. And then when you got home, were you pretty much like, had you kind of decided like, I'm not a Christian anymore? Or did that ever cross your mind, or was it kind of just a feeling you had?
I hung on to it for a little while. I just knew that I didn't like the evangelical part. So then I'm like, okay, what if I just don't evangelize, but I can still be a Christian myself? And so I hung on to that for another year and a half or so, something like that. I graduated from college. I went and moved to a different state to live with a girlfriend at the time, and just started being like, if I never feel God when I'm alone, and I've tried my entire life to do so, what's the point anymore? I've walked away from the community. I don't have community of Christians around me anymore. I'm living in a totally different state. My faith is not even affecting me individually. I don't feel the benefits from it in any way. What's the point? And then the final thing, the kicker that I always tell people, as I was coming out, I came out to my parents. I imagined my prayers shooting up into the sky, praying that my parents would accept me for who I am. And I realized that my parents were shooting their prayers up into the sky that their daughter wouldn't be gay. And I imagined both of our prayers arching up into the sky, colliding with one another, and falling back down to earth. And I was like, oh, that's right. None of this makes sense at all. And I stopped believing that day. I was like, nope, I can't be on this train anymore. This is a wild ride, and I'm not willing to do it.
That is a hilarious thought, like analogy. It's not funny what you went through. It's hilarious to me. Just this idea of like these two missiles, like, or something.
Yep,
like,
two missiles going up and like, colliding, and yep.
Oh, like their anti-gay missiles were going up, and
100% they were anti-gay missiles. You know it.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Wow, crazy. So
and I just thought,
like,
if that's what this is, then that doesn't make sense.
It makes no sense. Oh, right. This is bullshit.
Right. That's exactly what it was. I was
got
like,
it. Okay.
Oh, none of it makes any sense at all. That's right.
Like, now I get it. Yeah.
Yep. Now I get it.
How did you feel after that realization?
Free. I've never felt more free.
That's cool.
I was like, oh, okay. And then I started basing my life more on, measurable things, compassion, which is also not measurable, but I'm saying like measurable things as far as like the earth is not 4,000 years old, you idiots. It's older than that, and then not measurable things, but empathic things like compassion, understanding of other people, acceptance of difference, and then several years later, starting to acknowledge things like white privilege or, like first world privilege and my social position in the world. All of these things I never would have thought at that time as a Christian, because it's like, why would I question who I am? I am from the Lord.
You were told all the answers as a Christian, and you're given the truth, and you take that, you accept that full, lock, stock, and barrel, as they say. My pastor used to say that. So lock, stock, and barrel, you take the whole thing, you got to take it all. But when all of a sudden you realize a lot of it is baloney, like then you start thinking about how truly should I treat people?
Exactly.
What things are truly immoral, not just because someone 3,000 years ago thought they were, but what makes something wrong or right?
A man specifically, right? A man 3,000 years ago said women shouldn't have sex with each other, and you're just like, oh, okay, and I'm just like basing my entire reality on what that guy said and wrote it down in a book. Like, no thanks.
Yeah, I was really surprised. I went to, I was very conservative when I went to my liberal Bible school, but it was really shocking to me to learn that homosexuality is mentioned 7 times in the entire Bible. Like the whole big Bible, like that's how important it was.
And never by Jesus.
Right.
And never by Jesus.
Exactly. And then I read somewhere like there's like 500 references to taking care of the poor.
Yeah.
And this is the liberal gospel. Of course, they still, this is what they preach, and I'm all for that, like being accepting of people who are gay and caring for the poor. Like that's good, But anyway, that was just so surprising to me. Like, wait a second, like this was one of the 2 like things that like one of the most like abortion and anti-gay stuff was like, we're like top of the, in my upbringing, we're like, these were some of the worst things in the world.
For sure.
And that's why we don't like Democrats,
Yep. For sure.
So it was just shocking to be like, wait, 7 times? This is a big book. Yeah. So. Anyway,
7 times and never by Jesus. And that seems to be one that a lot of, for example, gay Christians really try to hit home. They're like, Jesus himself that you base your entire life on, Christians, never said a word about men sleeping together or women sleeping together. Never a word. And he was here on earth to impart to us the wisdom of God himself. He was God himself incarnate, and he never talked about homosexuality. There's got to be something to that. If he thought it was so important, he would have taken a second to speak on it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that should be the convincing point that like really brings everybody like, around like, oh, wow, you're right. Okay. Because that makes sense. But,
Exactly.
Yeah. There's a Portuguese movie called The First Temptation of Christ.
Uh-huh.
Have you heard of this?
I've heard of it. Is it? Yeah,
it's
sure.
Hilarious.
Please continue.
Well, it's hilarious. It's parody or it's a comedy. It's like 45 minutes long.
Like a satire type.
Totally. It's on Netflix, and it's hard to follow because they speak really fast, and I'm reading subtitles in English, But the whole premise is like Jesus goes into the desert and he's tempted by Satan for, when he's in the desert. But basically he brings home a boy, and he doesn't realize it's Satan, right? But his first temptation was like, he got a boyfriend when he was out in the desert, and he comes home and God the Father is there and Joseph's there, and Joseph's super jealous of God the Father because he's the real dad. And then God and Mary are like behind the barn, like getting flirty. It's so funny. But
that sounds so great.
Yeah. So I would encourage everybody to watch that. It's so, just the concept of it is hilarious. It's hard to, if you don't speak Portuguese, it's hard to keep up with it, but definitely give it a try, sometime. It's so funny.
That's so great. Yeah. And also just like any parody that like shows like Family Guy and things like that have ever done of like biblical times, hilarious. Just the things they point out, it's super funny.
Great. So what was most helpful to you during all the difficult stuff up to this point in your life? What helped you the most, do you think?
I think one of the most helpful things to me has just been the love of supportive people around me, probably. The various partners I've had throughout the years, my current partner specifically, most above all, she's incredibly supportive, extremely loving, very understanding and open to any of my past experiences and current experiences. She understands how difficult that can be when you come away from such a tight-knit community and a belief system. Your entire thought of what existed in the universe falls away completely. You have no grasp of reality anymore, and you have to build your own reality from scratch. What a challenging process, right?
Yeah.
And my wife now, she is just so understanding and supportive of me going through the hard days when I'm like, I don't get what the purpose of humanity is. And then on other days where I'm like, I'm just going to do yoga and feel fine about it today, or,
That's awesome.
Yeah, she's very there for the ups and downs. So I would say the love of others. My best friend, she's always there for me. Various friends who have been there for me over the years, I think is just the only thing that has been a sense of comfort while I still to this day, go through the process of deconverting.
Yeah, that's really cool. It's we're in it together, like as humans, as people, like
Right.
these tough things, whether it's deconversion or coming out to your parents or whatever the difficulty is, it's often the people that truly care for us that help us through. And I think that's really
Absolutely.
cool. It's really neat that you said that.
Absolutely. One last shout out
Yeah.
I would have to say then would be to friends' parents and my partner's parents, any other parents that act as surrogate parents to me because they do support me as gay. They do love me for who I am. They will come to my wedding celebration later this summer, while of course my parents don't know about it and aren't invited and wouldn't want to be invited anyway. These other people who try to help me through not just like walking away from Christianity, but also essentially walking away from super conservative Christian parents who don't accept me for who I am. And these other sets of parents do accept me for who I am. And that matters a lot to me. It has helped me tremendously.
That's cool. That's a really great thing for people who know someone who's gay or know someone in your situation. It's good for people to be reminded that like that means a lot. What I'm hearing you say is that means a lot to you, that those people are basically there for you and unconditionally kind of support you and are just kind and welcoming.
Definitely. Yep. Then they accept me into their families, even though I'm not flesh and blood. And that just feels really important. And it impacts my life greatly in a positive way. So I hope they know how important they are to me.
That's so cool. Well, when you think about who you are today, much different person from who you were when you were the maybe the most Christian version of yourself at Campus Crusade before anything changed. When you think back on the Christian version of yourself, what do you think about that person now?
I just think, bless her heart, she was naive. It's kind of like like I said earlier, what other choice did she have? What other choice did the past Chelsy have but to follow her family and her peers down the conservative Christian Midwest path, So I just think, poor thing, she was naive and being controlled by those around her. I am not so easily controlled now. Yeah. So I use a critical lens to view everything around me, to see like who holds the power, why do they hold the power here, what role do I play, what type of power do I hold in society, how does that affect other people? Taking that critical lens to realize my place in the world and how I affect others around me and how they affect me is how I approach things now. But past Chelsy wouldn't have thought like that.
Yeah. Is there something you've learned or experienced now that you would not have if you were still a Christian?
Feminism. I think so. Feminism unpacks so many things in the world. And it's funny because on one hand, I'm like, I refuse to be this like super brainwashed feminist because the last thing I want to do is jump from one brainwashing to the next brainwashing, right? But feminism is the fight against sexism and inequality in society, highlighting marginalized experiences so that we can have a more equitable society amongst all people, trans individuals, women, people of color, LGBTQ people, all kinds of people. It's elevating the experiences of everyone so that we can have a more equal and equitable society. And I think that I am on board for that 100%. And I think that is something that is not actually allowed fully in Christianity. Feminism isn't. The whole Bible is written in male pronouns for men. Women weren't even allowed to read when the Bible was written, and all of those things. It's like, it's not written with women in mind. And so women, marginalized others, as I've mentioned during this interview, difference, any type of other person is not considered, in my opinion, when it comes to Christianity. So I don't think feminism would have fit very well if I were still a conservative Christian. And I'm very happy for the knowledge I have now of feminism.
When you think about the person you were, the very Christian version of yourself, I know I asked a similar question, but this is different. So when you think about that person, the very Christian Chelsey, and then you think about today, who you are. Although you've gone through an enormous change in some ways, you're still the same person in other ways. What's one positive thing about yourself that you can see that was with you when you were younger that's still part of you today?
I would say, for a super simple answer, I would say musicianship. It was because of Christianity that I got to elevate my musicianship throughout time, as well as my participation in competitive percussion when I was in high school. But aside from that, it was Christianity, because it was involvement in worship teams and being worship leaders or a worship team member throughout tons of years, either in my youth group or at my church or in Campus Crusade or on a summer project or, in all kinds of settings. And musicianship is something that very much sticks with me today. And I still create music, and I still am a drummer, and I try to develop those skills, and my roots from all of that come from my Christianity and my playing Christian music with others. So I think that's a pretty simplified answer. A slightly more complex and personal answer would be that I believe that I have always been strong-willed, and that probably comes from my mom, to be honest, but it's something I had when I was a Christian, and it's something I still have now. And I don't mean that in like how astrology people would be like, oh, like stubborn like a bull from like Taurus or something like that. It's like I don't think I'm like that type of strong-willed. I think I am willing to stand up for myself. I don't struggle with a lot of insecurities in who I am, funny enough, right? Because I like didn't know who I was at first, and then later I realized I was gay, and then a lot of things developed over time. But still, I had like a sense of security in who I was as just a standing individual human being with agency. I always sort of felt like that, and that has remained to be the same and grown my confidence as an adult as well. So I would say, a sense of agency and strong-willed character, I think.
Yeah, that's really cool. I think that's a good answer. And the musician answer is good too. I think there are things like in our life that bring us happiness that sometimes don't have to be super deep or super complex,
Right.
So I think that's cool too.
Yeah, thanks.
So there are people that listen to the podcast who have recently deconverted. When you think about that person who's listening right now, what encouragement or piece of guidance would you give them?
Your process of deconversion can be a hard road, or it could be super easy. No matter what your journey, it's just so worth it. It's worth it to ask the really tough questions. I know it's scary. It's always scary to ask really tough questions about the creation of the universe, the purpose of humankind, all of those things. But it's so worth it to ask those questions and have those discussions. We are all just human. None of us have the answers to the universe, but we are all in it together. So those people certainly are not alone.
That's cool. Are there any resources that you found helpful in your process of deconversion? They can be specific to your situation, or they could just be in general. It can be anything. It can be a book or a movie, or it could be, anything that you can think of that you would consider a resource.
I would say two movies affected me quite a bit as a lesbian, accepting herself as a lesbian, and then also sort of critiquing Christianity. And those two movies, one of them was a documentary. It's called For the Bible Tells Me So. I think it's from 2007. So we'll see if it still kind of stands up today. I believe that it does, but listeners, feel free to let me know. And the other one is more satirical, and it is called But I'm a Cheerleader. And if anyone has seen, or if you've seen Orange is the New Black, Nikki from Orange is the New Black with the big blonde hair, she's one of the lesbians in the show.
Okay.
She is the main character in But I'm a Cheerleader, and RuPaul is also in But I'm a Cheerleader. So that is, yeah, a story of a conversion therapy camp, but it's a satirical take on it. And those two movies greatly impacted me, again, as a lesbian who was critiquing Christianity, and they brought me a lot of comfort and a sense of answers, I think. So those are two movies I would recommend.
That's great. I really like that. The first one I saw, and it was really good. From what I remember, it was really awesome. It was about like acceptance of your children when they're gay, and one former politician's in there with about his daughter. And I think the stories were so fascinating. It helped me as a non-gay person, like to understand like the pain of, like, in one case, one of the women, she's married to a man and she realizes she's gay, and like how hard that would be because you care so deeply for this person. And of course there's other stories too, but yeah, I remember it being really good. That's a good suggestion. Yeah. The other one I haven't seen, but now I want to.
It's hilarious. So I strongly recommend it.
That's awesome. That's cool. Let's see. I was going to ask you, is there anything else that we haven't touched on that you wanted to mention that maybe we didn't get around to talking about?
I don't believe so. I think that, yeah, we covered all of the bases. I would just want any listeners to know that, you know, I'm also in the fight with them of just trying to get through life in the happiest, healthiest way possible. And I'm here in asking the big questions of the universe and not knowing the answers, but being okay with that and talking to other people about it. I'm definitely in that group with them. So they're not alone. And I'm happy to know that I'm not alone because of stories I've heard on this podcast.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, if people want to get in touch with you, is there a good way for them to do that?
I would say feel free to friend me and message me on Facebook. I feel like that's a really easy way to do it. I know Facebook's not the best platform in the entire world. I'm not, you know, a Mark Zuckerberg fan or anything like that, but it's just an easy way to reach out. So if you spell my first name correctly and my last name correctly, it'll come up really easily. So yeah, check out maybe the description link of the podcast to see my name below. And I'm really easily searchable on Facebook.
Well, Chelsy, it's been really wonderful to meet you and also to hear your story. There were so many different layers to it, and just you know, it's really powerful to hear someone's story and hear what they went through. And I know that, you know, what you shared today will help somebody a lot. And I get emails from people all the time that say like, oh, you know, such and such episode was so encouraging to me, or so-and-so story. So I know someone's out there who's going to really benefit from this. And so thank you for taking your time to share your story today.
Of course. Yeah. Thanks for having me as a guest.
Thanks for listening to Voices of Deconversion. Join us next time by following or subscribing on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere you listen to podcasts.